Good Sunday morning, everybody. We have a huge week ahead. As soon as tomorrow, there may be an arrest in the Robert Mueller Russia probe. House Republicans are expected to release their tax plan on Wednesday, and congressional investigators take a deeper look at the Obama-era Uranium One deal. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. The Wall Street Journal reporting that at least one person has been charged in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. An arrest possibly coming tomorrow. Where does the probe go now? I'll talk with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, House Counterterror and Intel Subcommittee Chairman Peter King, and former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee coming up. I will also speak with Congressman McCarthy about the Republicans' tax plan set to be released this Wednesday. What are the remaining sticking points? We'll talk about it coming up. Plus, the road ahead for Saudi Arabia, part of my conversation with His Royal Highness, the future king, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and what may be the start of a revolution of sorts there. All that and a lot more coming up right now as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Well, tax reform will be the talk of the town this week in Washington as the House Ways and Means Committee prepares to release its tax plan on Wednesday. The measure will then go through a markup session before advancing to the floor. House leaders also hoping to address concerns expressed by the 20 GOP lawmakers who voted no on the budget bill last week. Joining me right now, Republican California Congressman and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Great to see you, Congressman.
Well, thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Wednesday's a big day. Can you give us a sense of where we are in terms of this tax bill and what are the sticking points that remain?
Well, first off, you have to show how far we are on this tax bill. The House just took up the Senate budget so we could move even 2 weeks faster to get tax moving. We have the criteria. We want it to be simple, we want it to be pro-growth, and we want to help the hardworking American. So we double the standard deduction. So a family couple, they now get their first $24,000 tax-free. You want to lower that corporate rate down to 20 so we can compete around the world. Latest studies show that means $4,000 more into household income by getting that up. Small businesses create more jobs. Lower that to 25%, the lowest it's been in 80 years. And simplify it so people could actually just fill it out on a postcard. Keep the home deduction, keep charitable, and expand child tax credit.
There is a point of debate, obviously, with the state and local income tax deduction and that being eliminated. What can you do to appease those congressmen and congresswomen in those high tax states like New York? Peter King has already said, I cannot vote on this.
Well, the one thing I'm from one of those, and I'm even a higher one. I'm from California.
Right.
And a lot of that happens to do with the state politics, more liberal, raising taxes and having the federal government write it off. What you really want to look at, and we've been sitting down with all those individuals, Kevin Brady, numerous meetings, and there's been a lot of great ideas they proposed, looking at dealing with the property tax portion. And the one thing you have to remember, if you double the standard deduction, if you lower the rates and you eliminate AMT, if people look at the overall tax plan and they live in those states, they're going to like the final outcome of what it deals with, especially if you're that middle-income, hardworking American. You're going to get a tax savings in the process. And if you're eliminating the AMT, that really offsets what people are doing when it comes to SALT. So we're looking at property tax because some of these states have very high property tax, and I think Kevin Brady's going to have something coming forward that the majority of those members are going to like.
That's not going to be enough, though, for Peter King. I mean, you can retain the property tax deduction, but he continues to say that New York pays into the federal government more than it's getting back. That, in fact, even Governor Cuomo tweeted just recently, under this tax plan, every New Yorker will get a tax increase. So how could the president say this is the biggest tax cut in history when, in fact, a big portion of the country is going to get a tax increase by eliminating that deduction?
Well, there's 2 points here you have to look at. First, Nancy Pelosi said the same thing, and she just got 2 Pinocchios, because it's not true, because it actually helps the middle class. Secondly, I come from California. The argument is you're not getting back your federal money. Well, first of all, California and New York, they have to live within their means. Federal government borrows, so they spend more than they actually bring in. Secondly, what you really look at, the biggest payments that are going out are to Medicare and Social Security. So if you come from a state that has an old population, you're going to get more than what you come from, more than what you pay in. I like the idea of California being more prosperous and being a younger generation. That gives us a better future. So you really got to compare apples to apples. That's an argument that doesn't play when you're talking about state and local tax deduction. If you're lowering the rate, letting people keep more of what they earn, so If I go from getting the first $12,000 tax-free to $24,000, that helps me save to buy a new home. That helps me determine whether I want to send my kids to private school and others. And then I lower the rate you're paying from 10% to 0, from 15 to 12. I'm actually keeping more of my own money. So it offsets any difference when it comes in SALT and actually lets me keep more and grow the economy.
Is there a way that you could sort of adjust that to a cap on certain income? So if you make more than $200,000, then you will not be able to deduct that. But if you make below $200,000, you can, in fact, keep that deduction. Or if you're just not generating enough revenue to put caps in place.
Well, we want to look at overall. And the one thing you have to remember, only about a third itemize. After we raise the standard deduction, fewer will itemize in the process too, because they'll have a better savings. We were looking at the property tax. There's a lot of different ideas going forward. I say, let's look to see what Kevin Brady brings out on Wednesday. But the one thing that is very important, those members that come from the state, they have been so productive in expressing what their districts are looking at. We've been looking at the numbers. They've been expressing what they want to see. And I think at the end of the day, their voice is being heard in what we're able to put forward for them.
Do you want to change contributions into a 401k?
No, I think 401ks are very important. What we're going to find out in ours, we're going to raise the amount that you could put in. The more that individuals can invest their own money, the better off we are in the long term. They have more capital, they can protect themselves in the future, and they're not looking to government.
I mean, is that a real significant amount of money that you can save? I recognize you're talking about a budget that was $500 billion overspending. The next year's budget, $500 billion overspending. You need to look for as much money as possible to pay for these tax cuts. But are you really going to get sizable money by doing anything to change 401ks?
No, look, the way we're going to deal with 401ks, there's two different ways to do it. Einstein said there's only one miracle in this world, the time value of money. So the more that you could put away earlier, the more you'll have later. And if you can do it and not be taxed later on, there is a way to make the Americans more self-insured, have greater resources. So the way we'll look at the 401k, we will protect it, we'll expand the amount that you can invest, but we'll also give you an option to actually not be taxed later in life, not have that tax burden hovering over you in the future, but actually have greater income in the future.
Some of the issue is that you've had all of these surprises in the budget, right? I mean, you had to give money, the U.S. gave money to Puerto Rico, Texas, Florida, California wildfires. You're just back from Puerto Rico. Tell us about what you saw.
I went down to the Virgin Islands, to Puerto Rico and Key West. It was a bipartisan trip. It's devastating because Puerto Rico we were dealing with even prior to getting hit by 2 hurricanes. Their grid system is probably the oldest one, the least efficient, and one that we need to not rebuild as is, but put a new 21st century grid system in there. We went further into the interior than any congressional delegation has gone.
I'm looking at you here on this plane overseeing the Florida Keys.
And this is bipartisanship. That is the Democratic whip, Steny Hoyer, and I. We're actually flying up in the air. That's a Coast Guard plane where they opened up the back and they let us hang out to actually look at the damage to get a real view going low about 1,000 feet. It is devastating what is caused down there. And what you really want to look at, we would look at certain areas that have been wiped out, but a house next door survived perfectly because of new building standards. The building standards matter. So when we go back and make investments here, we should prepare ourselves that there'll be a future hurricane sometime in the future. It's happened before and it'll happen again. But we should prepare ourselves so we're not repaying the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of more money going out, I mean, can you actually now look out to say, okay, this is what we're spending, or you have no idea? These are open questions in terms of spending.
Well, we're working closely with Mick Mulvaney at OMB. We're working closely with the governors in those states as well, in the territories. We want to make sure that it's effective, efficient, and especially transparent. We need accountability, but we want to do what's right. But we want to help these individuals just as any other American when they're injured as well.
Let me end where I began, and that is tax reform. Lindsey Graham this week said it's going to be a different Republican Party if we don't get this done. If you don't get this done by the end of the year, are you expecting that you lose the election in 2018?
Look, you should not vote based upon whether you think you win or lose an election. Just do what's right for the American people. Put people before politics. And the one thing I have watched in the last 8 years, growth has been so low. It's some of our worst years ever. Bill Clinton's worst year, his growth year, was higher than Barack Obama's best year. We just went through our second quarter of having 3% growth. President Trump has done an amazing job eliminating a lot of this regulation, cutting the Federal Register, getting growth back up there. Tax is the part that'll keep more money in Americans' hands, getting small business moving again, and more jobs created. At the end of the day, I'd love to run on that.
I got a text from one of the congressmen who said, I'm hearing bits and pieces of this tonight while I'm at dinner. And there's a story on Politico that says GOP tax bill shrouded in secrecy. Are you going to have another situation where we saw in healthcare where nobody knows what's in this bill until Wednesday, and then there's all of these fightings? You've got the real estate lobby saying, look, we don't want you to make all of these changes in terms of the real estate business. How are you dealing with all the lobbyists?
That is just simply a Democratic talking point, because think of this. We put our framework out there before the election. We did a conference all day where every member came in and we walked them through it. We have put out our postcard to the American people. This has been out there for a number of months sitting there. And what's more importantly here, those that want to keep their loopholes, yeah, they're going to argue and they're going to pay lobbyists a lot of money. But this is exactly why this president won the election, because he's listened to the middle class. He's fighting for the middle class, and that's what this plan will do. Create more jobs, put America competitive again around the world, and think of those trillions of dollars that are come back and invest in America instead of investing in other countries.
What if you don't get those congressmen from the high tax states? What if they vote no on the tax bill? Do you have a major problem here that you need to appease some of these people to actually get their vote?
They've had really good arguments. They've been very constructive in talking about trying to find the best policy going forward. And their ideas are going to be put into this tax bill. And I think when you see it roll out, you'll see that their input made a difference, especially there. And anybody that's living in those states, look at the entire plan. Because
the 20% corporate rate is a serious decline. And that's going to probably empower businesses to spend money and invest in jobs.
The latest study comes back, says conservatively $4,000 for a household. Then think of this. If your rate is lower, if you get to keep more of what you earn, double tax-free at the very beginning, you're collecting more money into your pocket. Right. So if someone's picking one item in the tax bill, look at the whole bill as a whole, and you'll actually save money.
So is the 20% rate, is that in jeopardy, or are you getting mostly agreement on that?
We're getting agreement on that.
That's terrific. Real quick, Congressman, on Robert Mueller's investigation here. Yes. We're supposed to get the first indictment tomorrow. The Wall Street Journal is asking for him to resign. Your thoughts on this investigation? Is this still a witch hunt?
I don't know where he's going. It brings a lot of questions to mind, especially who he hired at the very beginning. A lot of individuals, attorneys who played in politics, who have given money on the Democratic side. The one thing I do know for sure, let the investigation go where it may. This president won the election solely on that he connected with the American people. No other influence involved. Yeah. But the idea of what I've watched, what the Democrats have been doing, raises a lot of doubt of what they played in this election.
It sure seems that way. Good to see you, Majority
Good to see
Leader.
you.
Great to see you. Kevin McCarthy, Congressman, the Majority Leader in the House. We will take a break. When we come back, more on the Mueller probe in a moment. Where does the case go now? House Intel Committee member Peter King will join me. Talk to the Congressman about that. And then follow me on Twitter, at Maria Bartiromo, at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to hear from Congressman King and the guests this morning. We're looking ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has filed the first charges in his Russia investigation. The Journal reporting there could be an arrest as soon as tomorrow. I want to bring in New York Congressman Peter King right now. He is the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence and a member of both the Homeland Security Committee and Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
I got to get into the SALT issue with you on taxes, but first let's talk about this Robert Mueller investigation.
Sure.
The Wall Street Journal out with an op-ed on Friday last week, basically asking Mueller to resign. Let's take a look at that headline right here in the Journal, and I want to ask you your thoughts on this. It says, it is no slur against Mr. Mueller's integrity to say that he lacks the critical distance to conduct a credible probe of the bureau he ran for a dozen years. Given all of his conflicts, he could best serve the country by resigning to prevent further political turmoil over that conflict of interest. Your thoughts, Congressman King?
Let me just say two things. One, I'm on the committee which is investigating the whole alleged Russian collusion, and I have not seen one bit of evidence. We had Michael Cohen, who was President Trump's attorney in this week. He answered every question. I've been there for almost all of the witnesses. There's not one word of evidence linking in any way the Trump campaign to any Russian collusion. As far as Director Mueller, serious issues have been raised, certainly involving the uranium investigations coming up, the role the FBI had in that. Now, I have a great regard for Director Mueller, but I think there are issues here which he's going to have to address, because it is going to involve the investigation of what the FBI was doing and not doing at a critical time during our relationship with Russia when he was head of the FBI. So I'm not calling on him to resign, but there are issues he's going to have to address and discuss them publicly.
But do you think he's going to effectively address the fact that Hillary Clinton oversaw the sale of 20% of the U.S.'s stockpile of uranium, and then she was given $140 million to the Clinton Foundation? Is he going to actually investigate effectively the fact that John Podesta's brother, Tony Podesta, had a lobbying firm, that he was actually lobbying against sanctions against Russia? All of these things are so front and center, and yet we're still talking about the potential collusion with the president.
No, these are issues that I think Bob Mueller should come forward to the Congress and explain how he's going to address them, because it's not only a question of whether or not the Clintons, what involvement they have with uranium. It's also the fact that he was head of the FBI at a time when we've been told an investigation was being conducted by the FBI as to bribery, as far as collusion, involving the Russians and the Iranian, and yet this was approved by the cabinet, by the Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of State, and the President. Did the FBI notify the administration, the Obama administration at the time, this investigation was ongoing and all the allegations are being made? And if so, what was done? If they didn't, why not?
Yeah, all right, real quick, let me switch over to the state and local tax issue that you're really knee deep in. You heard what Kevin Brady just said. Is that going to be enough for you, property taxes, that they will keep that deduction in? It looks like that's what's happening, but they're going to keep the state and local deduction to be eliminated.
Well, first of all, let me just tell you that no one has spoken to me on this at all. We had one meeting with Kevin Brady on Thursday, and also Steve Scalise. I've heard nothing since then at all from anyone. Now, Kevin McCarthy did say about the property tax. Again, that is a step forward, but by not allowing the state income tax deduction, that has to be fully analyzed, because that is a major issue in my district also and throughout the state of New York. So this is coming out on Wednesday. They've had 9 months to put it together. This is a bill which is going to affect generations to come. But the impact is going to have. It's been 30 years since the last tax reform. We can't afford to have this go wrong. So I'm not going to sign on to anything until the full package is fully examined by economists and analysts in my district, and not just for my district, but also for adjoining districts, the city of New York and New York State, because all our economies are interrelated and interconnected. And to lose that deduction, which, by the way, goes against the principle we've had since 1913, that you don't have a double tax. You don't pay tax on a tax.
Right.
And that's what's happening here.
So
I'm still very concerned.
You've said New York gives $48 billion more than we get back from the feds. You've said that over and over. You're going to vote no, then, if that deduction is eliminated? Real quick.
Again, I want to see the entire package. Right now, I'm certainly not on board. This involves the future of my district for years to come. I'm not going to sign on. And the fact that we're getting it at the 11th hour raises real issues with me.
We'll be right back with that. Congressman King, thank you so much. Welcome back. The feud between President Trump and Senators Bob Corker and Jeff Flake heating up as the White House fires back at their criticisms ahead of a critical week on Capitol Hill this week. Will this war of words be a problem for the party on matters like tax reform? Joining me now to discuss that, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, also a Fox News contributor. Governor, it's always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Good morning, Maria.
Look, we know how important this tax reform plan is. Kevin Brady will come out with a plan on Wednesday. We know how important the agenda is to the American people, and yet these fights between the president and these senators, aren't they dancing on or walking on eggshells in terms of impacting the way they vote?
I have no idea why Bob Corker and, what in the world Jeff Flake have to be thinking when they go after Donald Trump in the midst of this discussion of tax reform.
Exactly.
They may not like him. That's their prerogative. But my gosh, Maria, it's time to do something for the American people, and they're acting very selfishly. They're acting very petulantly, and they need to grow up and quit getting in it with Donald Trump. They need to know he's always going to hit back harder than they have the capacity to hit, and do something, earn their paychecks, and move on.
Yeah.
That's as simple as I can put it.
I can totally understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, this is about getting his agenda executed. And if he loses votes because of personal matters, look, we know what happened with John McCain. Senator McCain blew up the health care bill because there's a personal fight going on. I mean, I asked the president this when I sat down with him a week ago when we were at the White House, and I asked him how important it is to have better relations with these senators. Watch this, Governor. I've got to get your reaction to what he said. Even your supporters say, you know, he's got fantastic policies. We want to see this through, but the bickering and the feuding actually gets in the way. So obviously the feuding with Senator Corker, I think there's a personal thing going on between you and Senator McCain. Do you worry that this bickering and feuding gets in the way of your agenda?
No, and sometimes it helps, to be honest with you. So we'll see what happens in the end. But I think actually sometimes it helps. Sometimes it gets people to do what they're supposed to be doing.
Bottom line here, Governor, are they going to need Democrats to vote yes on this tax bill? Do they have the votes?
Well, I think they do, because I cannot imagine that a Republican would go and even claim to be a Republican and then vote against a tax cut for all of the people who will benefit, including the people who need jobs, the people who need a better job, who need a better wage, all of whom will benefit from the tax plan. So, you know, at the end of the day, what are they thinking when they do this? But, you know, here's what I wonder. Why is it that some of these Republicans are so anxious to get a tongue bath from Charles Schumer and the national media, which is what they get if they are willing to go criticize President Trump? Why aren't they more interested in doing what their constituents at home want? And look at the numbers. Corker and Flake went to the toilet with their approval ratings in their home states once they decided that they were going to spend their time attacking the president rather than solving the problems of their citizens in their home states.
Yeah. Well, let me switch gears, ask you about what's going on with the Robert Mueller investigation, Governor, because tomorrow we may very well get the first indictment. What are you expecting to see? I mean, you saw the soundbite earlier, or the clip from the Wall Street Journal that's basically saying, look, Mueller is way too conflicted with his relationships within the FBI, having run it. He needs to step down, particularly since we've been following this witch hunt of an investigation looking for collusion with the Trump administration that doesn't exist, and all the other collusion is right in front of our noses with the Democrats.
Well, I think it's easier to find Bigfoot and Amelia Earhart than it is to find collusion between the Russians and Donald Trump. The fact is, what they really need to be looking at is the $972,000 that Obama for America paid the Perkins Cole law firm, why Hillary Clinton paid them $5.6 million in 2016, that same law firm who in turn funded the Fusion GPS research on the dossier that turned out to be total fabrication. There's some smoke, but it's not in the camp of the Trumps. It's in the camp of the DNC and the Hillary campaign. If Mueller doesn't go after that, then I think that he shows that all those people he hired who were Hillary donors were in fact there as shills for the Democrats in trying to protect her rather than protect America. One important point, Maria, that I feel like we've got to focus on. People have said, particularly among Democrats and a lot of the media people, but then I repeat myself, well, Hillary's not elected, so it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter for this simple reason. This is not about who won the election. This is about who broke the law and broke faith with the American people.
You know, I have a question, actually. I mean, this whole dossier, I'm glad you brought up this dossier, because I want to know what evidence came from the dossier, which now we know is a completely fabricated piece of nothing. Did the idea to wiretap Trump Tower come from anything from the dossier, which now we know was fabricated? This is an important point.
Well, there isn't anything that's come from it. I mean, it's proven to be a bigger piece of fiction than the entire Harry Potter series.
But they got approval to wiretap Trump Tower. Based on what? The dossier?
That's a good question that we need an answer to. And if they did, then where in the Obama administration was the push to do the wiretap? And let's be clear about a wiretap. We're not talking about just tapping a phone, but listening in and having surveillance that could be in many, many different forms. But why was that done? To whom it was done? Who had a look at it? And how high up did both the approval go and the surveillance actually end up? Those are important questions. And then, again, forget the politics of it. This is important because anytime an American's liberties, their civil liberties, are trampled upon by a federal government who can do pretty much anything they want to do, all of our liberties are at stake, and we better never forget that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Governor Huckabee, it's good to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria.
We'll see you soon. Coming up next, the U.S. and the Mideast. Signs of progress in Saudi Arabia, letting women drive, declaring war on extremism. I'm just back from Saudi Arabia. I witnessed what could be the start of a revolution. Hear part of my conversation with the Crown Prince, the future king, as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures this morning. Back in a moment. Welcome back. I am just back from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where I spent the last week. I witnessed what seems like the beginning of a revolution happening there. I was honored to interview the future king of Saudi Arabia, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, on stage at the kingdom's Future Investment Initiative conference. During our interview, His Royal Highness sent a message to the Saudi people and the world that he is leading a new vision in Saudi. While being interviewed by me, a symbol of freedom in my jacket and pants, not covered up, the country was buzzing about his remarks.
You have an incredibly beautiful country. You have the resources. But you are having radical ideas, some might say. Recently, you've announced that you will soon allow women to drive. You are allowing foreign investment in your beautiful country. Why now? What triggered this change in thinking?
First of all, I don't want to get out of this topic and discuss politics outside of the scope of today, but I'll just be very brief. Saudi Arabia was not like this prior to 79. Saudi Arabia and in the entire region, you have the awakening project spread after 79 for many reasons. Today is not the right day to discuss them. We were not like this in the past. We only want to go back to what we were, the moderate Islam that is open to the world, open to all the religions. %70 of the Saudi people are less than 30 years old. And quite frankly, we will not waste 30 years of our lives in dealing with extremist ideas. We will destroy them today. We want to live a normal life, a life that translates our moderate religion, our good customs. We coexist and live with the world and contribute to the development of our country and the world. This is something that there are steps that we have taken in the past that are clear. I believe that we will eradicate the rest of extremism very soon. So I don't think this is a real challenge, because we represent the moderate teachings and principles of Islam, and we have the right. The right is on our side and everything that we deal with. So I don't think that we are concerned.
Wow, that was history in the making. My thanks to His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President Trump announced $400 billion in new deals at the close of his recent trip to the Mideast, and Saudi Arabia included, as the two countries move to strengthen their relationship. The Crown Prince respects President Trump. They share a common enemy, they both say, and that is Iran. Joining me right now is Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group, author of Superpower, 3 Choices for America's Role in the World. And do you think that's accurate? They share that common enemy, Iran?
Oh, no question. And the U.S.-Saudi relationship, which has long been good, has gotten stronger under President Trump. Remember, it was unheard of for an American president to first go to Riyadh before any other country, and they treated him like a king.
And then go to Israel, by the way, back to back, which was incredible.
Direct, yeah.
2 weeks ago on this program, Ian, I spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said the same thing. Listen to this.
Israel and the key Arab states in the region support what the president has done. You said Israel supports the president. Absolutely. But so do Saudi Arabia, so do the Emirates. And, you know, when Israel and the Arab states agree on something, you should pay attention. I think this is a historic moment.
Is it? Could this be happening?
Well, look, there's no question that if you are in one of the Gulf states, you don't have big problems with Israel today the way you used to. It's not your priority. You're most concerned about Iran. You're most concerned about the rise of terrorism in your own backyard. Israel-Palestine is a long, long forgotten priority. And so they're willing to talk to the Israelis behind the scenes much more than they have before. Netanyahu feels like he's in a very comfortable position.
Real quick, can the Saudis get this done? He's facing pushback, actually.
So it was so interesting. The most important takeaway from your interview there was the fact that the Crown Prince recognizes that his country, as it is right now, is not sustainable. And we all want him to succeed. The ambition is kind of staggering and breathtaking. Some of the stuff is great and very long overdue. But let's be clear, Saudi society is really conservative, and the support that exists internationally for the Crown Prince is a little more consistent than what he has within his own country.
Let me move on. Let me ask you about Asia. President Trump is expected to go on his Far East trip a week from today, I guess next Saturday. He's going to Japan, China, Southeast Asia. He did $400 billion in deals with the Mideast when he came back from Saudi and that area. Will he do deals in China? What's most important?
This will be the most important foreign trip of his presidency to date, not only because it's a meeting with Xi Jinping, but also because he's heading into Asia with a real crisis, which is the North Korea issue. So, number one, everyone wants to know what Kim Jong-un does or doesn't do while Trump is there. Is he going to test a weapon? Is he going to an ICBM? Is he going to test an H-bomb? I mean, and how do the Americans react to that? Number one. So number one, we could really be seeing escalation as a consequence of that. Number two is how much time is Trump going to give China to get something done on North Korea before the U.S. starts moving on U.S.-China trade? By far the most important issue for your viewers. So, I mean, I think that this is a really big one. I just came back from Tokyo. His relationship with Abe is awesome, and certainly that at the beginning of the trip is going to go very well. The rest of this is going to be a lot harder to orchestrate.
Do we have a policy with China away from North Korea, or is this basically our policy with China is what are you doing to rein in North Korea?
Our policy with China from day one, if you remember, a year ago people thought there was going to be trade war between the U.S. and China. When Trump was willing to take the call from the Taiwanese president, all of that. Then with the Mar-a-Lago visit, things got much better. But they got better predicated not on the charisma between the two men, predicated that there was going to be some support from China on resolving the North Korea issue. Now, I will tell you, no one believes that either the Chinese can rein in the North Koreans or that they are willing to push the North Koreans suitably hard, cut off all their energy.
It's their biggest training partner. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but nobody thinks that the Chinese are going to cut off all their energy, potentially risking escalation or even fragmenting the North Korean regime. So it's a question of time. This is not going to last for 4 years. At some point, the Chinese will be seen by the Trump administration as having failed on this issue, and then we have a problem with them.
All right, we'll be watching that. Ian, great to get your insights, as always. Ian Bremmer there. The House Intelligence Committee, meanwhile, following the money trail in the Russia investigation. Will questions over Russia come back to haunt the Democrats? As we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures, we'll tackle that with our panel. Stay with us. Welcome back. Okay, the House Intel Committee reaching a deal with Fusion GPS. That's the research firm behind the Trump dossier. To see the company's bank records, it comes amid revelations that Fusion was first paid to conduct research during the 2016 election on then-candidate Trump by the conservative Washington Free Bacon. And then it was paid by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Want to bring in our panel on that. Caitlin Huey-Burns is national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Ed Rollins is a former White House advisor to President Ronald Reagan and a Fox News contributor. It is a pleasure to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us. So, is the whole Russia thing turning on the Democrats? Explain what's going on right now, Ed.
Well, clearly, up until this point in time, it's been all about Trump and Trump's people. Now, clearly, we're finding out that this Fusion, which is a opposition research company composed of former reporters, was being paid by the Democrats and by the DNC and by the Clinton campaign, who've all sort of denied any knowledge of it. At the end of the day, There's four things going to happen this week that are going to have big consequences. One is who gets indicted tomorrow out of the Trump world. The second is who was the lobbyist in Washington who worked for the FBI as a confidential informant and all this stuff, and that's supposed to be disclosed this week. Then the Fusion bank records, who did pay them and what have you. That's the third thing. The fourth thing, obviously, is the budget bill, which obviously will take. Well,
and then there's that.
And then you may have the new Fed chairman. So
it's a big week.
This is a week of roller coaster week, which is what last week was. And obviously, you've had one with your three major interview the president, interview the prince, and the prime minister of Israel. Just as a sidebar.
It's been an incredible 2 weeks for me.
Good time to contract negotiate.
Listen, in terms of this Russia probe, though, let's get to it. I mean, you've got an indictment coming tomorrow, but the fact is there's all this other collusion that has occurred. I mean, and basically, and this dossier. Why do we call it a dossier anyway? I mean, was that just a fancy way of saying this is something that's complete garbage?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, was it all made up?
Well, you know, there are arguments to be made that some of it was pretty salacious, obviously, and other elements could have been, you know, it hasn't been completely disproven. I think Republicans have lacked a counter narrative this whole time to the allegations surrounding Trump and Russia. And so you're seeing the House Intelligence Committee, you're seeing Republicans say we've had majorities in Congress for a while now. Why are we not being more proactive in going after this? So I think among the Republican Party base, I think this is a way for them to have a counter narrative. I do think, however, though, that with this indictment coming down tomorrow, and again, we don't know who it is.
We don't know who it is.
And we don't know what the charges are. I think that issue is going to take center stage at a time that Republicans really can't afford it because they have this tax bill coming out this week. The president, as you just mentioned, is preparing to go abroad for a really key important trip, and this is hanging over, and it just points to the idea that who knows what's coming next, and it's kind of this living in fear of things just dropping down.
The one thing that needs to be made very clear, when Comey, when he was the FBI director, had his meeting with the president and basically presented this document, and it's 17 memos that they're all put together. Normally, opposition research is press clippings, bank loans, that kind of stuff. It's not salacious information. In this document, there was salacious information that was unfounded and unproven. For him to walk in and say, Mr. President, I think you should know this, was pretty outrageous, because I would assume if I was the president, I was sitting there saying, is this your document, or whose document is this on your first meeting? Equally as important, it turned out he had made that same presentation to President Obama. President Obama's team got very active in looking at everything after this, and I think what you're going to really find out that all of this stuff gets started by these documents that were not basically tested out, and certainly the FBI basically is going to get a black eye if they didn't do their job.
That's the question I asked before. Right. Did any reasoning to actually wiretap Trump Tower come from what was in the dossier? Because if so, it's based on fabrication.
We don't know what started all of this. We don't know what went to FISA, which is the court that basically gave them the authorization to move forward on this. We don't know what the catalyst for all of this was. My assumption is this document had a big role in all that, and if it did, then I think the FBI failed in its mission.
Big development if that's the case. Right. Let's take a break. Then we've got to go back to the agenda. Will all of this impact the tax package that we're all waiting to see on Wednesday? More with the panel as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're back with our panel, Caitlin Huey-Burns, national political reporter with Real Clear Politics, and Ed Rollins, former White House advisor to President Ronald Reagan and a Fox News contributor. Robert Mueller, fights with Corker and McCain and Jeff Flake. Does this get in the way of the agenda and passing tax reform, Ed Rollins?
There's no question it does. I think this will be a week like we've not seen in a while. I think there's so many distractions, and by the end of the week, you can't predict today what's going to happen at the end of the week.
That's true.
It's just going to be a crazy week, and I think to a certain extent to try and put forth a tax distracted.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that there's not a bill yet. This week we are supposed to get actual legislation, but as we saw, I think the budget vote was very revealing. 20 Republicans voted against it, which shows that they have so much error in the House. alone the Senate, and as we were talking about earlier, the Senate is really going to be the difficulty here. And you talk to Republicans and they're concerned a little bit about this relationship because they want to be able to present a united front, because this tax bill is going to be a proxy for showing that they can govern, right?
Yeah, but
passing some legislation.
I'm sorry, if these 20 or so Republicans get together and say, we're not voting yes on this tax bill because of the elimination of the state and local deduction, they've got a problem.
Exactly. And a couple of them are very top supporters of the president.
Right, exactly right.
Lee Zeldin, for example, from New York, voted against this budget.
Lee Zeldin, Peter King.
Exactly.
This was also
Claudia
This
Tenney.
was also the easy vote. This was the budget resolution. 18 members had already voted against the own House resolution. 20 voted against this. This is not the tax bill. This is not the details of the tax bill. This is not what they have. No one knows what's in a budget resolution. But they will know what's in a tax bill. And if all of a sudden you basically have voted for something eliminating state and local taxes, and you live in New York or California, New Jersey, or somewhere else, your constituents are going to remember, and they're going to put it in your back.
And the lobbying effort has not really begun in earnest, right? I mean, that's going to be the really big key here, too, is you have all of the stakeholders involved, much more than healthcare, I think.
So do you think they get it done?
I don't think they get it done this year. I do think they can get it through the House. I think they're foolish to try and make it a deadline by the end of the year, Christmas. I think you need to basically try and build this. The president has to go sell this thing to the country, and that's not been done yet.
Yeah.
What's next? Big week this week.
Exactly. You'll have the legislation come out this week, which will really be key because, as we know, the devil will be in the details, and there'll be a lot of different groups coming out and talking about these details.
That's when the lobbying begins.
That's when it really begins, and it really depends on what the president is doing this week, right? That's why I say the Mueller investigation has the potential to overshadow any goodwill that they want to have in the House and Senate. Nice. Also preparing for this overseas trip.
All right, we'll leave it there. Caitlin, good to see you. Ed, it was a pleasure.
Thank
you so much. That'll do it for us. I'll see you tomorrow morning on the Fox Business Network. We'll have all of that and more on Mornings with Maria on Fox Business tomorrow, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. Have a great Sunday. Here's Media Buzz, Howie Kurtz.